First one is from Mike, who says, do you recommend linking Twitter to Facebook so when you post on one, it shows up on the other?
No, I don't at all. They're very, very different tools, and they should be used very differently. Facebook, you really don't want to post more than once an hour because of the way that the algorithms work on Facebook. With Twitter, you really should be posting a lot more frequently than that. And, they're just very, very different platforms. So I would not suggest that. 5 years ago, when people were still trying to figure out social media as it related to radio specifically, we did used to connect our accounts together because people didn't really understand Twitter. So if you had a Facebook post, you would just send it on over to Twitter and vice versa. But now you really can't get away with doing that anymore.
About Twitter poll questions, and if you use them, how do you use them and how often?
We use them a lot, and I use them a lot for other stations that I work with too. I think they're great. One thing to think about with the poll is it actually goes away after a certain amount of time. So make sure you get a screen capture of that, and then you can tweet the results out. But I love using Twitter polls.
All right. Tim asks, how do I get verified? And is having a verified account as important as he thinks it is?
I feel it's important, yes. There are certain, you have to apply for verification through Twitter. So you need a verified phone number. You need an email address that they can confirm that it's actually you. You need a bio, a profile picture, a header picture. You need a birthday. I'm not sure you need the birthday for corporate accounts or for station accounts, but there are all of the things that you need, and you have to have your tweets be public too. So they have to think that your account is of public interest and is authentic. So they are going to actually peel through your tweets and see how you are tweeting. And so if you're being declined and you have all of the things that I just mentioned, it's because they're looking at your tweets and they're feeling that for whatever reason, they're not of public interest.
Okay. Drew asks, and I think we covered this in the presentation, but might hit on it again. Should a station account be retweeting the content from the jock accounts?
Absolutely. Absolutely. NPR, BBC Radio 1. There's a lot of other stations too that do a really great job at retweeting their jock accounts too.
Yeah, and be selective on what you do. If the personalities are using it as their personal Twitter account and they're doing something that's completely irrelevant to the station's brand or their personality, you don't have to retweet everything. Be selective and retweet the right ones.
Absolutely. The worst thing that you could do in that case is actually set up something where it just automatically retweets. That you wouldn't want to do that. So it's something that it is a manual process. And, that's the thing with Twitter. To be authentic, you really can't get into scheduling and using tools that make you hands off of Twitter. It's something that you really need to dive into and be a part of the community.
Which leads right into Brandy's question. Brandy has the simplest and probably the best question about social media of all time. How do you juggle all the social media platforms without overdoing it?
That is a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out. It's tough. It's tough. 5 years ago, there was just Twitter and Facebook to worry about, and people weren't really using Twitter to its fullest potential. So there was a lot of focus on Facebook. Now you've got, the Instagram and Snapchat. And if you're a music station, it's really important that you really are on everything. However, if you don't have the resources, pick one or two platforms and do them well. If you really can't be everywhere, there's nothing worse than having a Twitter account and not using it in the right way. You may just focus on things that you know that you can do well and things that you are resourced to be able to do. Exclamation
point on that comment. Pick the one or two platforms you can do well and be great at them. And if you can't devote the time and the resources to do Twitter well, don't tweet. Put it on hold for a while, or those are the stations that should probably cancel that Twitter account. You don't have to be on all of the platforms. Just be great on the ones that you are. How does a personality maximize social media use between Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram stories?
It's a tough juggle. Depending on the station that your format. If you're an AC station, being on Instagram may not be the place that you should be. That might be more of a Facebook play. I know certainly from my own experience, it's been that way. So just pick the platforms in which your audience are fully engaged, and I think juggling them all, again, you've got to pick one or two and do them really well. And it's tough to juggle everything because you'll constantly walk around with your face in your phone bumping into light posts, so it's really tough. But you can use, I talked about not using content schedulers. You can use content schedulers if it's something that you're doing on a daily basis. So if you know that on Facebook you want to do 6 posts today and you want to do a post on this, or something you talked about this morning, in 10 minutes you can go in and use a scheduling tool and have everything done. So Twitter, you can use it that way, but it's important that you're more present on Twitter and responding to people. That's a big thing too.
I think for some personalities, you can use the scheduling tools if you know that you're going to be promoting something at a specific time that you're doing on the air at a specific time tomorrow morning, which can relieve some of that pressure while you're on the air of thinking about your social media. So if you do a feature every morning at 7:10, then you know what's going to be in that feature. You can send that tweet out just before 7:10 or just after 7:10. That is going to start the conversation, but you do have to be present in the conversation.
And you have to just be present in what's going on around you too. There was a station locally here in San Diego that a concert had been canceled, and it was all over Twitter about 3 days before. But a scheduled tweet went out that said, "Oh, we're really looking forward to hanging out with you tonight." And so it's really important that if you are using a tweet scheduler, that you are aware of the tweets that you have coming up and that you make adjustments.
Perfect. Boyd asks, is there any value in one person having multiple Twitter accounts?
There is. If you're a jock that you have an interest in something that may not be in line with the positioning of your station, then you should create your own account that is in line with the positioning of the station, and then have your own personal account that is for something else.
Question from Andrew about radio stations creating content for hashtags, creating hashtags like Music Monday or Throwback Thursday or Follow Friday, in other words, for the features that they do on their stations.
Make your hashtag, if you're coming up with it, very unique to your station. The late night talk shows do a really good job when it comes to hashtagging. And even, when American Idol was on the air, they would have hashtags up, several different hashtags up during their broadcast. I know Survivor, when you're watching Survivor, they'll have hashtags in the corner too that relates to what you're seeing on the TV. And, that's one thing. Twitter is the perfect complement to media. It's, when you're watching YouTube, you've got your face in YouTube and you really can't do anything else because it's an all-encompassing, engrossing thing that you're looking at. Twitter is something that you can lightly look at and follow along. You can listen on the air and you can watch TV and use Twitter at the same time. So that's where hashtagging really can be a benefit to you, especially as a radio station.
All right, let's get to some that are on the webinar today. Greg's asks about tips or strategy specific to political talk shows.
Ooh, I have a little bit of experience in this. You have to talk with, to people in the way in which they were talking and joining in the conversations. If you're a political talk radio station, then you have an opinion and a slant. So make sure that you maintain that slant. And, people are listening to you because they want to either argue with you or, they want to agree with you. So, it's tough. I think that you're in a much tougher position in working with those kind of stations than you are with a music station. But you can be very, very effective. I mean, Twitter is a news medium, so make sure you're retweeting people that are like-minded and really continuing the conversation with them.
I think it comes down to reflecting your personality and your brand values and staying true and authentic to who you are as a personality at all times, whatever that represents, both on the air and off. So if you're one of those politically oriented talk shows that rants and raves and gets everybody riled up and kind of takes that whole I'm mad as hell and not going to take it anymore attitude, you need to carry that attitude through to all of your platforms. But realize when you do that on Twitter, it's going to be hard to grow your audience using Twitter for it. You're probably just rallying those people who are already there. So you might want to modify that just a little bit, but stay authentic and true to who you are as a personality. John asks, what was the name of the software tool for optimizing the tweets? That was CoSchedule, John. Go to CoSchedule, CoSchedule.com, and look for their social media optimizer tool. It's free and it's really good. So check that out. Abel asks, our station uses a station account when we're on the air, but off the air we use our personal accounts. On the personal account, I am on the air, but also have different interests like dog behavior and fashion. Should I have separate accounts for different interests?
Yes, I think so. Unless you feel that your interests will resonate with the audience, even if it's not something that you're doing on the air. But I think it's really important in radio that, if you're allowed to have a personal life. So keep that separate and have, a separate Twitter feed for that, and then have one that's specific to the station. And that's how a lot of stations handle that. They actually have very specific ways in which they would like their personalities to be showcased. And so they have separate Twitter accounts for that. And it's still managed by you, so you're still having a personal relationship with your audience.
Tim follows up and says, asks a question about getting his account verified. He's had some trouble doing that. Tim, since we don't know all the details of that, at the end of, before we say goodbye today, Lisa and I will give you our contact information, and you can reach out probably to Lisa because she knows a lot more about it than I do. And we can try to diagnose why you're not getting verified, and we'll try to help you out with that.
Absolutely, yep.
Drew says, isn't the high that your listener gets from a follow negated when they notice you've unfollowed them?
Most listeners, I can tell you, will not notice that you have unfollowed them unless they have a piece of software that tracks people that unfollow them. But that's something that we in radio do, but it's not something the average listener is going to do. So I don't think they do, no.
I don't think they have time to pay attention to it, for one thing, and I think very few people have that software installed, unless it's their business where they really want to keep track of who's following them and unfollowing them. I don't think they're going to find that out. Another way you could manage it is by using lists, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can have lists. That's something that I use a lot. And I have all of my influencers in different lists, or, I'm very interested in graphic design and the design and art community. So I have a separate list on my Twitter account where I follow those specific types of content. So that's something that I use all the time. And that's something that I would highly recommend with your stations, that you organize your followers into lists.
Chuck asks a question. I think this gets into replies, which we really didn't talk about, but he said, I've heard one of the best ways to show up in a Twitter stream is to use a period in front of the @ symbol. That gets into if you want everybody to see it, right?
That's if you want everyone to see it. It's not necessarily going to make you show up in a Twitter stream more. If you did an @ symbol to Kevin Hart for real, and you started out your tweet that way, only he is going to see it, and everyone else that follows him that follows you. So I suppose what you're saying is correct, but putting a period before it is a best practice, because it means it's going to show up in your Twitter feed and that everyone can see your tweet versus just the person that you're direct messaging.
Chuck also asks about music bots. Can you elaborate on the use of bots for a feed like the BBC?
Yeah, so depending on the software that your station uses, a lot of the station software will, and I'm sorry, this isn't something I know a terrific amount about because I'm not that familiar with that side of the business, but they can send out a feed. It's like the RDS feed that shows up in your car. and they can send out a feed and you can connect it with Twitter. I know the software that we use here, which Tracy, you might know what it is, but that's what it does. It sends out, it can send out a tweet if you want it to. So you can set a separate account up and just, it's like an RDS feed.
Yeah, I don't know what it is exactly, but we can find out for you if you're interested in it. Chuck, I know Chuck, just shoot me an email. And if you want to find out what that is, I can track it down and get back to you on that. Bonte says our challenge here is that the DJ has moved on, so we choose to have the show Twitter account. Then the DJ uses the show Twitter account. So,
I think what he's saying is that if your jock has a Twitter account and then they leave the station, you don't have access to it anymore, and they're using it at another station. I think
so too.
Yes. So I would highly recommend, as a best practice, to have some level of control over your jock's Twitter accounts. You should have the login, and a lot of news stations do this as a best practice. So if you're in TV news in a local news market and you come into a new news market, they'll create a new Twitter account. So it might be, Tracy Johnson News 8, and they start helping that new jock build a brand, and the station does have access and influence over those accounts. So it depends on the type of organization that you are and how popular and how long in the market the jocks that you hire have been. So there's a couple of different schools of thoughts on that, but I would suggest, if you can, to have access to those.
So if you're in management or a program director, then try to get control over all of your personalities' accounts. If you're a personality that's on this, try to keep control of your accounts so you can take it with you when you cross the street.
Exactly.
Abel, this will be the last question unless some more come in here in the next couple of minutes. But Abel says, what are you doing wrong when engagement is minimal to none on Twitter, but when you're out in person or on the phone, they're telling you about certain tweets that they like?
You can't get hung up on likes and retweets. And I think as a society, especially the younger generation, that's something that we get really hung up on. Under each of your tweets, to the right, there's a little chart. And you can actually see how well your tweets are doing and how many people it's been exposed to. And often you'd be surprised the number of people that have looked at your tweet or engaged with your tweet, but maybe haven't liked it. Whenever you include a link to somewhere else in your tweet, remember that they've clicked on that link and they've engaged with you, but now they're on a different website. And so they may not ever come back and like that tweet on Twitter. But it doesn't mean that they haven't engaged with you. Twitter, I think that's why people really have a hard time with Twitter, because they don't always get that feedback that they might get with Instagram or with Facebook. But it doesn't mean that people haven't seen it.
Lisa, how can they follow you or tweet directly to you?
My Twitter handle is Lisa_H2OS, like the water, on Twitter. And you can reach me on LinkedIn as well.